My name is Rebecca. And the moment my sister-in-law leaned in and whispered, "Just keep quiet about this," I had no idea those 3 words would unravel everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. A secret tucked neatly behind her confident smile seemed harmless. Then, like a pebble dropped in a river, but days later, that pebble caused ripples so wide I was left standing in a storm of accusations, betrayal, and shame. They said I was the traitor, that I had destroyed everything. But the truth was far heavier, far crueler than anyone realized. It started on a Sunday evening, the kind of evening that smelled like rosemary chicken and freshly baked rolls. My husband David had set the table while I fussed over the gravy. Our home, warm, lived in with faded wallpaper and too many framed family photos, was ready for guests. And when the knock came at the door, I knew before opening it that it would be Claire. Claire, my sister-in-law, David's younger sister, a woman who carried herself like she was perpetually auditioning for a role, perfect posture, perfect hair, and a smile that had a way of making you second-guess yourself. "Rebecca," she exclaimed, breezing in her perfume heavy with lilacs. She hugged me, though her arms never really touched me. "You always make this place so cozy." David grinned. "Glad you made it, sis." Dinner was pleasant, as dinners often are when everyone is careful with their words. We talked about David's work at the bank, my volunteer hours at the library, and Claire's endless social events. But as the night wore on and dishes were cleared, Claire asked David to fetch something from the basement, his old photo albums. That was when she leaned close to me, her voice dropping so low it felt like it was meant only for the shadows. "Rebecca," she said, her eyes glittering with something sharp, "there's something I need to tell you. But you can't say a word to anyone, not even David. Promise me." I froze. Secrets always came with weight, and hers sounded like one carved from stone. Still I nodded. "All right, I promise." She exhaled, almost like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Good, because if this got out, it would ruin everything." I wanted to ask what everything meant, but David returned just then, arms full of albums, laughter on his lips. The secret stayed sealed. That night, after Claire left, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My husband's steady breathing beside me only deepened the contrast to the unease crawling under my skin. What could she possibly have meant? 2 days later, I got my answer. It was late afternoon when Claire called me. Her voice was shaky, unlike the smooth, confident tone I knew. "Rebecca," she whispered over the line, "remember what I said about keeping quiet? Well, it's about money. A lot of money. I need you to cover for me if anyone asks. Just say you haven't seen me on Friday nights. Please." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "Claire, what's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble?" Her laugh was brittle. "Nothing I can't handle. Just promise me again, okay? Keep quiet." The line went dead before I could protest. I sat there staring at the phone, the weight of her secret pressing down harder now. It wasn't just gossip or embarrassment, it was something bigger. And Friday nights. Where was she going? The next family gathering came quickly, and with it tension I couldn't quite name. Claire smiled, laughed, poured herself wine like she hadn't handed me a ticking bomb days earlier. But when my father-in-law asked casually where she'd been last Friday, mentioning he'd stopped by her place and she wasn't home, her eyes flicked to mine. And in that second, I realized the secret wasn't just hers anymore. It was mine too. Probably out with friends, I heard myself say, my voice oddly steady. She told me she had plans. Claire's lips curved into a smile. Not gratitude exactly. More like victory. That night driving home, David looked at me. "You seemed nervous tonight. Everything okay?" My hands gripped the wheel tighter, just tired. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew I had crossed a line. And once you cross it, there's no going back. The days after blurred together. Whispers from Claire, quick phone calls, a web being spun around me without my consent. Until one morning, as I sipped coffee on the porch, my neighbor leaned over the fence. "Rebecca," she said, her brows knitted. "I saw Claire last Friday, downtown. Looked like she was meeting someone. A man. You know anything about that? My stomach turned cold. I opened my mouth, but no words came. That was when I realized I wasn't just keeping quiet. I was becoming the shield for something I didn't understand. And secrets like that, they never stay buried. I could feel it coming like thunder rolling in the distance. The storm wasn't far off. And when it broke, it wouldn't just hit Claire. It would hit me too. The storm arrived sooner than I expected. It was Thursday evening when the phone rang. David's phone, not mine. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing. "It's Dad," he muttered, swiping to answer. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah, we're both here." I sat at the kitchen table folding laundry, my stomach knotting at the sound of his father's voice carrying through the receiver. It was sharp, anxious. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the urgency. David's face paled. "What, are you sure?" "No, that doesn't sound right." His eyes darted toward me. "Okay, we'll be there first thing tomorrow." He hung up slowly, his hand lingering on the phone like it had burned him. "David," I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. "What's wrong?" He looked at me, his jaw clenched. "Dad says there's been talk about Claire, something about missing money from the charity fund she helps with. They're saying she was seen out with a man, someone tied to it." The blood drained from my face. Missing money. A man. Friday nights. The puzzle pieces clicked into place in my mind, forming an ugly picture I didn't want to see. David rubbed his forehead. "Dad says people are whispering, and it's making the family look bad. He wants to hear Claire's side. Tomorrow. At their house." I swallowed hard. And what will I say when they ask me? That night, I barely slept. I replayed every moment, every word Claire had said. Keep quiet. Cover for me. My mind buzzed with questions. If I stayed silent, I was complicit. If I spoke, I was betraying her. Either way, the cost would fall squarely on me. By morning, I had dark circles under my eyes. David noticed, of course, but he didn't press. We drove in silence to his parents' house, the old two-story with white shutters and a porch swing that had been in the family for decades. Inside, the air was heavy. His parents sat stiffly in the living room, the curtains drawn against the daylight. Claire was already there, perched on the edge of the sofa, looking polished as ever, though I noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she held her coffee cup. "Claire," their father began, his voice rough. "We need to talk about what's being said." Claire's smile was practiced, but thin. "People love to gossip, Dad. You know that?" "Gossip doesn't explain missing money," he shot back, "and it doesn't explain being seen with someone connected to it." Her eyes flicked to me, just for a second, a silent reminder, keep quiet. I felt heat rising in my chest. David spoke up. "Claire, just tell us. Where have you been going on Friday nights?" Silence. The kind that stretches too long, presses down on everyone in the room. Finally, Claire laughed softly. Rebecca knows, she said, her tone light, but laced with steel. Every head turned toward me. My heart thudded painfully. "Rebecca," David asked, his voice searching. I opened my mouth, words choking in my throat. Claire's gaze pinned me down, daring me to speak, daring me to betray her. My lips parted. She told me she had plans. That's all." The lie slid out bitter and heavy. David frowned. "Plans with who?" I shook my head. "She didn't say." A hush fell. His mother looked from me to Claire, suspicion creeping into her eyes. And that was when I realized Claire had done more than hand me her secret. She had placed me squarely in the line of fire. The conversation unraveled after that. Voices rose, accusations flew, and Claire clung to her story that it was all a misunderstanding, that people twisted the truth. But the damage was done. Doubt had been sown, and in their doubt, everyone's eyes kept drifting back to me. When we left, David was quiet. Too quiet. The silence in the car was worse than shouting. Finally, he said, "Rebecca, you're not telling me something, are you?" The words stung. "What do you mean?" "You looked guilty back there, like you knew more than you said." I gripped the seatbelt strap across my chest, my knuckles white. I don't know anything, David. I only know what Claire told me. And what exactly did she tell you? I hesitated. That split second of silence was enough. He sighed, shaking his head. Rebecca, if you're keeping something from me, it's going to tear us apart. My throat ached with unshed words. I wanted to scream that I hadn't asked for this, that I'd been dragged into it. But all I said was, I'm not keeping anything from you. It was a lie I told myself as much as him. That weekend, everything changed. We went to church on Sunday, as we always did. But instead of the usual warmth, I felt eyes on me. Whispers in the pews. Neighbors who usually greeted me with hugs now gave me cautious smiles. Afterward in the parking lot, one woman approached me, a friend of the family. Rebecca, she said gently, I don't know what's going on, but I hope you're careful. People are saying Claire's been covering something up. And they're saying you might be involved. The words hit me like a slap. Me. She nodded sympathetically. Because you're close to her. Because you've been seen defending her. I stood frozen, the sun beating down on me, my husband unlocking the car a few feet away. That was the moment I realized the secret wasn't just a burden anymore. It was a weapon. And Claire had aimed it straight at me. That night, as I sat on the porch, I could almost feel the weight of their stares even in the quiet street. I wasn't just Rebecca anymore. I was the woman who knew too much, who said too little, and who now carried the mark of suspicion. And Claire, she had slipped away into the shadows, leaving me to bear it. Monday at the library started like any other coffee gone lukewarm by 10, the faint smell of paper and binding glue floating in the stacks, regulars shuffling in with their tote bags and quiet routines. I was at the circulation desk scanning returns when Linda, our branch manager, approached with the careful smile employers wear before saying something that might bruise. Rebecca, do you have a minute? I followed her to the tiny back office. A desktop hummed. Someone had taped up a comic about overdue books next to a quote from Emerson. Linda closed the door behind me and sat folding her hands. I received an email this morning, she said gently, from a donor with the Hands and Hearts Foundation. They said you volunteer sometimes. I helped at last year's book fair with their table. I said, a prickle starting at the base of my neck. Why? She swiveled the monitor so I could read. The subject line hit first concern about funds possible misconduct, RE. Below a few clipped paragraphs, an unnamed source claiming someone with the initials RE had accessed petty cash at a charity event. A suggestion that RE had deflected questions, a nudge to check deposit timing. RE. My initials. My maiden name initialed on sign-in sheets on dozens of library forms. So ordinary until it wasn't. That's not me, I said, voice too thin. I never handled their cash. I fetched coffee and folded flyers. Linda nodded. I believe you. I just wanted you to know, in case this spreads, she hesitated. People are talking. Talking. The word felt oily, sliding where it shouldn't. Back at the desk, I tried to lose myself in the rhythm of scanning and shelving, but the air had changed. Mrs. Klein, who'd known me for years, offered a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. A teenage volunteer whispered to another, and both glanced at me. The fluorescent lights buzzed like gnats. At lunch, my phone lit up with a text from Claire. Heard a rumor you've been dragged into the charity gossip. Don't worry. I told them you're loyal. Just keep quiet, okay? We don't need to feed it. A beat later. The emoji landed like a stamp on my skin. Loyal. Keep quiet. By evening, David and I were at his parents' for meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the dining room set with the good plates, and a runner embroidered with autumn leaves. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked theatrically as if counting down to something we didn't want. His mother ladled peas onto our plates with the fervor of someone trying to fix a problem with vegetables. So she said, not looking at me, Claire tells me you've been helping at Hands and Hearts. On and off, I answered, keeping my tone light. Steam curled from the mashed potatoes. Last year's fair. A mailing day in the spring. His father cleared his throat. The sound was sandpaper on oak. There's been confusion about deposits. Timing paperwork? People remember faces, you know. That's all. Faces like mine, I asked before I could stop myself. Silence spread across the table like a stain. Claire, immaculate in a navy sweater, leaned forward, elbows just barely on the table, ladylike, rehearsed. Dad means no harm, she said sweetly. We all know how messy events can get. Rebecca was such a help running around keeping track of sign-ups. She even offered to drop the cash box at the office. Once, remember, her eyes found mine bright as glass. So kind. I never? The word snagged on bone. Every head turned. Claire tilted her head, feigning confusion. Oh, I must be mixing up evenings. She laughed lightly. It all blurs. Anyway, what matters is we're handling it. To me, sotto voce, best not to fuel it, okay, for the family. For the family. The phrase dangled above the table like a chandelier about to crash. On the drive home, the road unspooled under the headlights in a pale ribbon. David's hands were planted at 10 and 2 knuckles, pale. You never took their cash box, did you? I stared out at the passing dark. No. She made it sound like you did? I know what she made it sound like. We drove a mile in silence, the car's heater huffing. Finally, he said, if you forgot to mention it. I didn't. The 2 words were firmer than I felt. He exhaled long. Okay. The next morning, a manila envelope sat on our porch without a return address. Inside, a screenshot printout of a bank's ATM camera still. Grainy. Night vision, greenish. A woman at a machine head bowed. The timestamp, last Friday, 10:42 p.m. One of Claire's infamous Fridays. The figure's hair was pulled back like mine. The coat could have been mine. The note clipped to it. Is this Rebecca thought you should know? A friend. David stood with the printout in his hand like it might go off. Do you recognize the jacket? It looks like half the jackets in town, I said. And that's not our bank. His eyes searched the photo, then searched me. Where were you last Friday? At home. You worked late, remember? I fell asleep on the couch with a heating pad and an Advil. He nodded slowly. Right. But I saw it, the crack. Small hairline threading through trust like frost finding a window pane. By Wednesday, the whispers had grown teeth. In the grocery aisle, Aunt Lorraine appeared behind a fortress of paper towels. Rebecca. Dear, she began, voice soft as powdered sugar. You know we all love you. But some of us are worried you've been covering for Claire. That puts you in a terrible position. I didn't ask for a position, I said. I asked for dinner and a quiet life. Well, families aren't quiet. Not really. She reached for my wrist, her gold bracelet chiming. Just tell the truth and be done with it. Whose truth and done with what? Outside sleet stitched the windshield, turning the world to brittle glass. I sat in the parking lot until my coffee went cold, imagining myself walking into Claire's condo and laying the whole mess at her feet. Here, take back your secret, your Fridays, your ghostly men in ATM photos. But even in my fantasy, she smiled and said, Oh, Rebecca, you're so emotional. That evening, she did one better. She appeared at my doorstep with a Tupperware of lemon bars and concern arranged artfully on her face. I hate that this is circling, she said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. Her perfume lilac and insistence rushed ahead of her. I told the board you're not involved, but... She trailed off, letting the word hang. But I asked. But people remember you and me together. You know how perception is. She placed the lemon bars on the counter, then lowered her voice. The best thing for you is to say as little as possible. If you deny too loudly, it looks like panic. If you explain, it looks like guilt. So neutral, calm, quiet. You mean silent. I mean wise. She smiled, all empathy and edges. Want me to call David ease his mind? No. Suit yourself. She touched my arm as if we were sisters. The contact felt like a mark. We'll get through this. Families always do. After she left, I scrubbed the counter where her container had sat, then scrubbed again as if something might lift a film a spell. When David came home, he set his briefcase down gently, as if even that could startle the fragile piece. Your mom called me, he said. She's worried. She says Claire says you've been anxious. I laughed once a sound with no joy in it. Imagine that. Becca. She's building something, I said quietly. A story. And I'm the prop. He rubbed his temples. I don't want to fight. I just want this to be over. So do I said. But stories don't end because we're tired of them. That night, sleep came in tatters. I dreamed our dining room had become a stage, all of us hitting marks we hadn't agreed to. Claire in the spotlight, me in the wings holding her lines, the audience leaning forward to catch me misspeak. Thursday, as I left the library, I heard my name through the crack of a half-open office door. I should have kept walking. I didn't. She's nice enough. A voice I recognized said Marcia from Records, but you know what they say? Where there's smoke. Another voice murmured agreement, and she always seemed eager to please. You know, those are the ones who get pulled in. Heat shot up my neck. I stepped back, heartbeat, thudding in my ears, the hallway stretching long and airless. Eager to please. A lifetime summarized and weaponized in 3 words. On the way home, red taillights smeared across wet pavement. A radio host chattered about weather and football colors. I heard only Claire's last visit, the soft iron of her advice. Neutral. Calm. Quiet. I turned onto our street and saw my reflection in the windshield. Mouth-tight eyes shadowed a woman I barely recognized. It hit me with the clarity of cold air. This wasn't drift. This was design. Claire had set the lines, and I had read them, thinking I was helping her hold the backdrop. All the while, she'd been repainting it stroke by careful stroke until the scene transformed and the audience saw exactly what she needed them to see. Not her as the question. Me as the liar. Friday dawned with the brittle clarity of early winter, the kind of light that reveals every crack in the sidewalk, every fingerprint on the glass. I woke with a stone lodged in my chest. Somewhere between night and morning, I realized the whispers weren't going to pass. They were calcifying, settling into people's minds as fact. At breakfast, David spread marmalade on toast without looking at me. The clink of knife on china was louder than words. You're quiet, I said. So are you, he answered, and we both let the silence return. By mid-morning, the phone rang. Caller ID board member, Hands and Hearts Foundation. My stomach dropped. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Rebecca. This is Elaine? The voice on the line said, warm but clipped like a teacher forcing politeness. I'd like to invite you to our quarterly meeting this evening. Claire mentioned your name came up in discussion. We feel it's only fair you address certain concerns. Address. Concerns. The words wrapped barbed wire around my ribs. I'll be there, I said before common sense could save me. The meeting was in a beige conference room at the community center. Fluorescent lights buzzing a plate of untouched cookies in the corner. Around the oval table, familiar faces wore unfamiliar expressions, measured wary, already judging. Claire sat 3 chairs down, immaculate. As always, navy blazer, crisp hands, folded. She smiled faintly at me as though we were co-conspirators. Elaine at the head cleared her throat. We've received reports of irregularities in petty cash deposits from last Friday's charity auction, specifically missing funds noted during the handoff process. Witnesses recall seeing Rebecca present at the event. Can you clarify your involvement? Every eye turned to me. Heat surged up my neck. I wasn't anywhere near the cash, I said steadily. I helped set up tables, then left early. I never handled donations. Claire tilted her head as if surprised. I could have sworn I saw you near the deposit envelope when I handed it off. Her voice was gentle, feigning confusion. Maybe I misremember. These evenings blur. Gasps rustled like paper around the table. That's not true, I said sharper now. I wasn't with you at that handoff. Elaine's gaze darted between us. Claire, are you certain? Claire gave a small, graceful shrug. I don't want to accuse. I just remember Rebecca nearby. Nearby. Such a harmless word, but it painted me in the frame of suspicion. My pulse roared. You're twisting this. I didn't touch a cent. The board members leaned back, absorbing the clash like an audience at a play. Their silence said everything. One voice, calm, one voice, desperate. After the meeting in the parking lot, Claire approached under the hum of the lamplight. Her breath clouded in the cold. "You didn't have to snap like that," she said lightly. "It makes you look frazzled." "Why are you doing this?" My voice cracked on the edges. Why drag me into something I had nothing to do with? She smiled, almost tender. "Because, Rebecca, sometimes families need scapegoats. Better you than me." The words hit like a slap. She patted my arm, turned, and walked away, heels clicking on asphalt. By Saturday, the storm had reached David. His mother called him voice, brimming with strain. I heard the fragments from the kitchen, Rebecca. Questions. Money trail. Terrible for Claire's reputation. When he hung up, he rubbed his temples. They want answers. They're scared this will tarnish the family name. The family name, I repeated, hollow. What about my name? He looked at me, torn between loyalty and fatigue. Claire swears she saw you near the envelope. Can you at least see how it looks? David. I locked eyes with him. She's lying. You know she is. His silence stretched too long. The stone in my chest grew heavier. Sunday afternoon, I walked the wooded trail behind our neighborhood, damp leaves slick underfoot. I needed airspace, anything beyond four walls echoing with doubt. As I rounded a bend, I saw someone ahead, Elaine from the board, bundled in a red scarf. She slowed when she noticed me. "Rebecca," she said gently, "I don't know what's true, but I'll tell you, this perception becomes reality faster than facts. If you want to survive this, you'll need proof." Proof! The word landed like an anchor. That night, staring at the ceiling, I realized silence was no longer survival. It was surrender. Claire's secret had become my noose. If I didn't act, it would tighten until nothing of me was left. The only way out was light. I had to find what Claire was hiding. I started where the paper trails might be, at the Hands and Hearts office, a narrow suite wedged between a tax preparer and a nail salon. The hallway smelled like acetone and old carpet. A single framed poster in the lobby read, "Small acts change the world." The irony pinched. A young receptionist with a bob and a polite smile looked up from her keyboard. "Can I help you?" "I'm Rebecca Evans. I sometimes volunteer." I swallowed. I was hoping to speak to someone about Friday night's deposit log. There's been confusion. Her smile faltered, then reassembled itself. "Our treasurer isn't in." She gestured to a corkboard of nameplates. "Claire Whittaker, outreach chair." The neat brass letters winked at me. "Maybe I could leave a note," I asked. She hesitated, then slid a clipboard across the counter. As she did, a corner of yellow paper, half a sticky note caught on the metal edge. Numbers were penciled on it, half torn. 9803 ATM E10 28P C branch. The rest ripped away. Oh, I felt the tug of temptation like a riptide. Proof could be ordinary, a time, a place. Proof could be as small as a scrap. "Is that from Friday?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She whisked the note back, blush creeping up her neck. "Internal." I nodded, thanked her, left. On the sidewalk, I stood in the pale winter sun and realized how ridiculous I must look, a woman in a wool coat hunting clues like a child playing detective. But the sticky note hammered in my head. ATM 10:28 p.m. It matched the timestamp of that anonymous photo. By evening, the hunt was over. I didn't find documents or emails or confessions. What I found was a text from David's mother, "Birthday dinner tonight, 6:30. Family only. A summons dressed as a celebration." I baked a pecan pie because rituals matter even when everything else is sliding. I trimmed the edges, watched sugar bubble, listened to the tick-tick of the cooling oven. The pie felt like an offering to ancient gods. Take this and spare me. The house on Clydesdale Lane had worn the same wallpaper since the 80s, tiny violets marching in tidy rows. The front hall smelled of pledge and pot roast. Coats piled on the rack. Laughter came from the dining room, brittle and bright. "Happy birthday," I said, handing the pie to my mother-in-law. She kissed my cheek perfunctorily. "Thank you, dear." Her fingers lingered on the pie pan a beat too long, as if willing it to absorb her discomfort. We gathered around the table. Silver candlesticks glowed. Water beads clung to crystal. At the head, David's father cleared his throat. Before we cut the cake, your mother wanted a moment. My stomach dipped. Family only. Moment. She folded her napkin with surgical precision. No one wants tonight to be uncomfortable, she began, which is exactly what people say before dropping a match. But rumor thrives in darkness. We should be candid. Claire's gaze slid to me like mercury. Across from me, Aunt Lorraine arranged her fork and knife on their plate as if aligning compasses. Rebecca, my mother-in-law, continued. We've heard things. From the board. From friends. We know you would never intentionally harm the foundation, but... She glanced at Claire. Claire rose a stack of papers in her manicured hands. I didn't want to bring this here, she said, voice delicate with regret, but transparency. She distributed photocopies down the table. Ledger columns, a schedule, the heading event, handoff, and deposit timeline. Friday, she said softly, pointing 9:30 p.m., cash counted. 9:45, envelope sealed. 9:50. I left to meet the courier. A few minutes later, she looked at me, almost apologetic. Rebecca was seen near the table. Multiple witnesses. Seen near, I repeated the words dry in my mouth. And this? She continued, sliding out a grainy print, the ATM still I'd found on my porch. Gasps pinged around the room like dropped marbles. That isn't me, I said. You can't even see her face. It's the coat, Aunt Lorraine murmured, eyes on me. It looks like yours. I wasn't there, I said, hearing the thinness of my own voice. I was home. David's father steepled his fingers. Then this will clear up quickly. You'll have no objection to sharing your phone's location data for that night. I blinked. My what? Your phone, he repeated. If you were home, it will show you were home. Facts and gossip. I glanced at David. He looked like a man straddling two boats drifting apart. If it clears you, he said quietly. Why not? Because the premise alone, prove you weren't a thief, was a verdict pretending to be a question. Because once you accept the frame, you start losing ground you didn't know you were standing on. Of course I'll share, I said, even as the humiliation burned, but this is backwards. I didn't do this. Claire sighed, immaculate. Rebecca, no one wants to think you did. But there are patterns. Her eyes softened. You've always been so helpful. Eager. People ask you for small favors, and you say yes. Sometimes small favors become big mistakes. What small favors, I asked. She tilted her head, covering me on Fridays, telling Dad I had plans when he asked. It creates confusion. Across the table, everything stilled. My mother-in-law's knife hovered above the butter dish. David stared at me, hurt blooming and hardening in one motion. You asked her to lie, he said to Claire. His voice cracked in the middle. Not lie, she said, all innocence. Protect. For the family. She told me to keep quiet. I said the words tumbling out before I could stop them. The room pivoted. All eyes swung to me. I felt viscerally the chain snapping onto my own throat. She asked me not to tell anyone where she was going. She said it would ruin everything. Rebecca, Claire whispered, wounded now, exactly as rehearsed, we're sisters. That's what women do. We hold each other's confidences. And when the secret becomes a weapon, I asked, when holding it makes me complicit in something I don't understand. David's father pushed his chair back, the scrape loud like a gavel. Enough. This is my wife's birthday, not a tribunal. Feels like a tribunal, I said. Because you're defensive, Aunt Lorraine said softly. Guilt makes people loud. Heat swarmed my face. Or injustice does. Show us your phone. Someone said maybe a cousin, maybe the room itself. Just show it. I reached for my bag, then stopped. Not because I was hiding anything, because I suddenly painfully understood even if the data put me on my couch with a heating pad at 10:28 p.m., even if I subpoenaed every security camera between here and downtown, the stain had already bled. Claire had been painting for weeks, careful strokes, and the picture was nearly dry. She had given them a story in which I was helpful, eager nearby the perfect mark. And people like neat stories. They're easier to pass at church. My mother-in-law's voice trembled. We trusted you. Trust, I said, is not the same as obedience. David's head snapped up. Becca. I looked at him, the man I loved, and wondered how many tiny concessions it took to become unrecognizable to yourself. One secret, one favor, one silence. Claire's eyes were shiny now. She dabbed the corner of one with a napkin. I never thought you'd turn on family, she whispered. Turn on family, I repeated, almost laughing. You handed me a grenade and told me to cradle it. Please, my mother-in-law said, brittle, desperate. Please don't tear us apart. I thought of the sticky note, the receptionist's blush, the ATM timestamp, the board's careful faces. I thought of how quickly a woman becomes a rumor and how slowly she becomes herself again. My mouth filled with the taste of metal. I swallowed it down. I set my phone on the table and slid it toward David. Take whatever you need, I said. But understand this, I am done being quiet. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chairs scraped, voices rose. Hands reached for the device like it contained all the answers. Claire stayed very still, watching a small, inscrutable smile knitting the corners of her mouth. I stood. I'm stepping outside. No one stopped me. The hall smelled like violet wallpaper and aging air. In the mirror above the console, a woman looked back at me with burning eyes and a jaw set too tight. Behind me, muffled through wood, the family that had once been mine argued over my innocence, the way people argue over weather, passionately, pointlessly, as if anyone could change it by insisting. On the porch, cold air bit my cheeks. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, twice, then fell silent. The sky was the hard blue of porcelain, cloudless, unyielding. I pressed my palms to the railing until the wood printed into my skin. The front door opened. David stepped out, phone in his hand, pain in his eyes. It shows you were home until 10, he said. Then, your location's off. It goes vague. Wi-Fi sleeps, I said. Phones drift. He looked like a man translating a language he'd once spoken fluently and now only half remembered. They think you're hiding something. I know what they think. He searched my face. Tell me you didn't do it. I didn't. He nodded, slow, but I could see the crack had widened. Not a break, not yet, but the fault line had woken. From inside Claire's laugh floated out soft and consoling, the sound you make when you pat a shoulder at a funeral. That was the night the script flipped completely. Not because I confessed, or because I shouted, or because I could suddenly conjure evidence from a clean air. It flipped because my silence, my care, my refusal to throw a match in the wrong place had been reframed as deceit. By dessert, no one said the word out loud, but it hung there between the candles and the cake heavy as lead. That was the night they all saw me as a traitor. The days after the birthday dinner stretched long, brittle like panes of ice you're afraid to step on. I went through motions, teaching my English classes, returning papers, attending the Saturday bake sale. But everything carried an echo. People looked at me, a beat too long. Neighbors offered smiles that didn't quite land. At church, Mrs. Harkins, who'd once knitted me a baby blanket, patted my hand and whispered, "These things blow over. Blow over," like gossip was weather. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat through hymns, my voice thin, my throat sore. David stood beside me, hymn book, open eyes fixed straight ahead. We drove home in silence. At the kitchen table, I finally said, "You don't believe them, do you?" His hands tightened around his coffee mug. Steam curled up, fogging his glasses. "I don't want to," he said. Not wanting to and not believing are different things. I don't know what to think, Becca. The photo, the timing, Claire. Claire, I spat. You mean Claire who asked me to lie for her, who told me to keep quiet? His eyes flickered, conflicted. Why would she set you up? Because it keeps the suspicion off her? Because if people are staring at me, they're not staring at her. He leaned back, exhaled. You're asking me to believe my sister would I'm asking you to believe me, I cut in voice shaking. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was crowded, every memory, every doubt, every loyalty, jostling for space. I decided to go straight to the source, the bank. Monday morning, I stood at the customer service desk asking for a manager. I'm not here to dispute charges, I explained, hands clasped tightly. I need to know who made an ATM deposit Friday night around 10:28 p.m. The manager, a balding man with kind eyes, gave me a professional smile. I'm afraid we can't disclose client transactions without a court order. Even if I was accused of something I didn't do. His expression softened. I'm sorry, ma'am. Policy. I walked out to the parking lot, heart pounding. The sky was pale gray, heavy with the threat of rain. My car felt like a coffin when I shut the door. Tears blurred the dashboard. I wanted justice. Instead, I got walls. Back home, I found an envelope slid under our door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the ATM still again, only sharper this time. Enlarged, cropped to highlight the figure's silhouette. My coat unmistakable. Scrawled across the bottom in red marker, traitor. I dropped it like it burned. My breath came fast, shallow. Someone wanted me cornered, and they were tightening the rope. When David came home, I showed him the paper. He went pale. Who do you think I said? He rubbed his forehead, pacing. This has to stop. Maybe we should take a break from family dinners, from events, let things calm down. Hide, you mean? Protect ourselves. From your family. From what they believe. The distinction cut. The next blow came quietly. At school, the principal called me into his office. His face was apologetic but firm. We've had a few parents call, concerned about recent rumors. Until things are clarified, we think it's best to place you on temporary leave. Temporary leave, I repeated, numb. Because of gossip. Because perception matters, he said gently. I walked out of the school building with my box of desk belongings, the hallways eerily silent. The children's artwork on the walls, bright suns, crooked houses, seemed to mock me. That night, Claire showed up at our door. She wore her polished mask, navy coat hair, glossy eyes wide with concern. Becca, may I come in? Against my better judgment, I let her. She perched on the sofa, crossing her legs. I heard about the school. I'm so sorry. I stared at her. You did this. Her brows lifted, lips parting in shock. Me, Becca? No. I've defended you. Defended me by saying what? That I'm confused. That I meant well. That I'm guilty but pitiful. Her silence was answer enough. I leaned forward, voice low. What were you doing Friday night at 10:28 p.m.? She blinked. I was delivering the deposit. Where? Downtown branch? That ATM doesn't match the downtown branch? For the first time, I saw a crack in her poise. The smallest hesitation, the faintest twitch of her jaw. Then she recovered. You're mistaken. I'm not. Her eyes hardened. Careful, Becca. Accusations without proof will only hurt you more. She rose, smoothed her coat, smiled with practiced pity. I'll pray for you. The door clicked behind her, leaving the smell of her perfume, a sharp floral that clung like poison. Sleep deserted me. I lay awake listening to David's breathing, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every conversation, every sidelong glance. The family had accepted Claire's narrative, and she'd built it brick by brick until I was trapped inside. But walls can be broken. I told myself this over and over. There had to be a way to pry open the truth. The question was, how much more of myself would I lose in the process? The breaking point came at Sunday supper, the one tradition David insisted we maintain. The table groaned with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Laughter rang hollow. Claire across from me wore that same serene smile. Halfway through the meal, David's father cleared his throat. We've been discussing. For the good of the foundation and the family's reputation, Rebecca should step back from involvement. Permanently. It was framed as mercy, but it was exile. I set down my fork, hands trembling. And if I refuse? Claire's eyes gleamed. Then people will keep talking. and the damage will grow. Sometimes sacrifice is noble. I laughed bitter raw. Noble. You mean convenient? The table went silent. All eyes on me. In that silence, I felt the last thread snap. I stood. If you want a traitor, you have one. But remember, you chose the story, not me. I left before anyone could speak, the door slamming behind me, echoing in my chest. Back home, I locked the door, leaned against it, and finally let the sobs come. My world had shrunk, friends, work, family, all slipping through my fingers. And still one thought pulsed like a heartbeat: Claire's hesitation. She was hiding something, and I would find it, no matter the cost. I didn't sleep so much as hover above the bed, heart thudding in the dark like a fist on a locked door. At 5, the sky was stucco gray. I put on the same wool coat everyone suddenly recognized and drove toward town on streets still slick with night. The anonymous photo had one thing Claire didn't account for: background. In the top left corner behind the ATM's greenish glow, a mural bled into frame blue swirls a yellow sun, a spray of white gulls. I'd seen it before, I was sure. Not at the downtown branch. Somewhere smaller. I drove alleys like a detective out of time until I turned onto a strip mall at Hawthorne and 8th, and there it was, the mural on the side of Sunshine Dry Cleaners, gulls, peeling in the damp. The ATM sat tucked into the corner next door, branch 9803, the tiny metal plate read 9803 from the sticky note. My breath fogged in the cold. Someone had been sloppy enough to jot the code and sloppy enough to drop it, but precise enough to use my reflection for the rest. I went into the dry cleaners, bell chiming. A man in a V-neck sweater looked up from the barcode scanner. The place smelled like starch and steam. "Do you keep exterior camera footage?" I asked, voice too bright to be anything but brittle. "From last Friday night, around 10:30. He eyed me warily. 2 weeks retention. "It's been 9 days, I said. "Please, I'm not the police. I'm just trying to salvage my name." He studied my face the way people do when they're deciding whether you're human or headline. Finally, he sighed and waved me toward the back. 5 minutes. That's it. We stood in a cramped office, the monitor showing 4 quadrants, counter-pressed doorway, parking lot. He nudged a slider back to Friday, 10:00 p.m., then hit play. In sped-up frames, cars ghosted, in and out people blurred into comets. At 10:26, a navy silhouette entered the corner of the frame, woman, coat belt tied tight. She moved lithe, quick, purposeful, the kind of movement a person makes when they've practiced. She crossed straight to the ATM, the face camera too grainy to read, but the profile in the dry cleaner's lens was momentarily clean hair. Swept back, that tilted chin, a silver watch flashing at her wrist. "Freeze," I breathed. The owner tapped the spacebar. The still held. The watch face caught a flare of light. A nick on the bezel threw a tiny starburst to the edge. Claire's watch had that nick. I'd seen it at the board table when she lifted her wrist to the ledger, the tiny comet at 2 o'clock. "She's a customer," the owner said slowly. Recognition dawning. "Picks up on Tuesdays. Polite. Navy blazers." My mouth went dry. Can you export that clip?" He hesitated. I could get in trouble. "Please," I said, and heard the plea in my voice and let it stand. "They've labeled me a thief. I'm not." He looked at me a long, kind moment, then slid a flash drive from a drawer. 5 minutes, he repeated, not unkindly. By noon, I had the footage on a USB and a knot in my stomach I couldn't untie. I drove home and called Elaine. "I have something you need to see," I said, "but not at a meeting. At your office. Today." She didn't make me beg. 3 o'clock, she said. "And Rebecca, bring everything." Everything fit in a plastic folder, the anonymous prints, the photo with traitor slashed in red, my notes and the flash drive I clutched like a talisman. Elaine's office still smelled faintly of potpourri and printer ink. She closed the door, dimmed the lights, and I slid the USB in. We watched the clip in silence. 10:26, the approach. 10:28, the transaction. 10:31, the exit. The navy coat, The scratch-flared watch, the mural like a signature in the corner. "Dear God," she said softly when it ended. She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she exhaled through her nose as if releasing a season's worth of selective blindness. "You do know what this means. That the deposit didn't happen where she said, that she was at branch 9803, not downtown." I swallowed. "And that it wasn't me." Elaine nodded, once decisive now. "And the board will see it with me in the room." "Tonight?" I asked. "Tonight." Word traveled the way important words do, fast selectively, like current. By 6, the beige conference room was full again. Board members with knitted brows, a few spouses lurking in shadows, David in a chair near the wall, pale and taut as a string. Claire breezed in 2 minutes late, wrapped in calm. "I didn't expect a meeting," she said, unbuttoning her coat. The silver watch flashed. A nick caught the fluorescent light and threw a little star to the ceiling. Elaine stood. "We have new information to review?" She held up a hand before Claire could speak. "No comments until we've all watched it." We watched. The room made that collective "oh" sound people make at magic tricks in evidence. Someone whispered, "That's the mural by Sunshine." Someone else said, "That's not downtown." The clip ended. The room breathed. Claire smiled, composed, more careful than before. "That could be anyone." "Zoomed it shows your watch," Elaine said evenly. "Your coat. Your gait." She looked down the table. "And we checked the bank log. There was no deposit at downtown Friday night. There was a deposit at branch 9803 at 10:28 p.m. Her eyes lifted cool. "Your deposit, Claire, not Rebecca's." Claire's smile thinned. "So I used a different branch? That's hardly a crime." "It is when the amount doesn't match the count," the treasurer said quietly, sliding a paper forward. "We reconciled today. The envelope was short by $1.840. A hush pulled tight. Claire laughed, high, incredulous. "You think I took it? Me after everything I've raised for this town." She turned, landing on the one audience who had always clapped. "David, tell them I would never." David's chair scraped. In the stillness, his voice was careful, as if each word weighed more than it should. "We checked our router logs," he said. "Our home Wi-Fi shows Rebecca's phone connected Friday from 9:04 p.m. through morning. No disconnect. No gaps. Whatever that anonymous photo is, it's not her." My throat closed. He was looking at his sister, not at me. The pain in his face was a mirror of mine. Claire blinked. The mask slipped a fraction. Rage flickered fast as a match. "This is a witch hunt," she said, voice pitching higher. "Convenient to blame the woman who's done the labor while the rest of you eat cookies and clap." "The only witchcraft here is spin," Elaine said calmly. "This board is calling for an independent audit. Effective immediately, you're suspended from your role. And we'll be turning these materials over to the police." No. Claire stepped back, hitting the table's edge. "You can't." "We can," Elaine said. "And we will." The room exhaled as one. The work of shifting a story is louder than the whisper that started it. Papers rustled. A chair leg squealed. Claire's eyes cut to me sharp as glass. "You did this," she said, small and poisonous. "You ungrateful." "You asked me to hold a secret," I said, steady now. "You turned it into a cudgel. I won't carry it anymore." For a heartbeat, something like fear stuttered in her face. Then she turned on her heel and walked out, watch, flashing door swinging like a curtain falling. No one cheered. Real endings don't sound like finales. They sound like breath returning to a room that's been holding it too long. After the board milled and murmured apologies braided with excuses, "We should have asked questions. I'm sorry we wanted to believe and none of it mattered, and all of it did." Elaine squeezed my hand. "We'll make the statement tonight," she said. "Public. Clear." In the parking lot, breath turned to smoke in the cold. David stood by the car, hands deep in his coat, shoulders hunched. Streetlights cast cones on the asphalt, catching tiny snowflakes like ash. "I'm sorry," he said before I could speak, "for not standing sooner, for letting her write you into a role because it made the dinner table quieter." Tears pricked hot in the bitter air. "I needed you," I said. Not perfect, just here. I am, he said. I will be. He swallowed. If you still want me. I laughed a breath more than a sound. We're a lot of broken parts, I said, but they're ours. We'll figure it out. We stood like that a long minute, the kind that can hold a year. Snow began in earnest, soft and slow. Somewhere not far off, sirens wailed, not for us, but near enough to feel like punctuation. In the days that followed, the audit rolled like a tide. The police called. Statements were given. The foundation issued a correction, a public apology by name. Some people restored my place in their minds with grace. Others pretended they'd never doubted. A few will always tilt their heads and say, where there's smoke, but I learned the hard truth: you can't control the weather. Only your roof. When I returned to school, Mrs. Harkins hugged me in the hallway, tears bright. These things don't blow over, she whispered, but they pass. You stood. At our kitchen table, David and I set new rules, like you set a table for two, gently, purposefully. Secrets are not love. Silence is not loyalty. Family is not a shield you must strap to your chest when someone hurls stones from the porch. A week later, Elaine asked if I'd consider joining the audit committee. We need people who don't mistake charm for truth, she said. I said I'd think about it. Saying yes is powerful. Saying no can be holy. On a clear afternoon, I walked past the mural by sunshine. The gulls chipped, but still flying. And I felt something I hadn't in months, lightness at my own name. Rebecca. Not a rumor. Not a role. A person with a spine and a voice. If this story found you while you were sitting in your car staring at a photo you know is wrong, or nodding through a dinner where your name is a suspect, hear me, you are not what they say in the quiet. Secrets shapeshift when fed silence. Speak kindly, but speak. Document more than you think you need. Find your Elaines. And if you've carried a secret like a hot coal because someone called it love, set it down. Your hands are for building. If you've been here or close to here, I hope you'll share your story below. Someone needs it. And if you want more tales that walk into the fog and come out with a little more sky, subscribe and stay. We're stronger when we tell the truth together.